And also, please silence your phones. Would welcome everyone to the 7th meeting of the Senate Standing Committee on Families and Children. Secretary would please call the roll.
Senator Girdler. Here. All right. Senator Harper Angel. Here. Senator Bledsoe. Senator Meredith. Here. Senator Tishner. Here. Senator Webb. Senator Westerfield. Senator Wise.
Here.
Vice Chair Rocky Adams. Here. Chairman Carroll.
Here. Okay, everyone in their seats, we've covered that. This meeting is going to be conducted much like the House meeting was conducted on this particular bill. These proceedings will be held in a calm, structured, and professional manner. The focus of this meeting needs to be on the content of testimony, not the distractions. Applause, yelling, including during testimony, comments made out loud, or personal attacks against legislators will not be allowed. You will be given one warning, and if the action persists, you will be removed from the room. And that delay will count towards the time allotted to present your side of this issue. We will bring the bill sponsor up to cover the bill. We will cover changes in the committee sub, and then we will ask the bill sponsor to leave the table. Those opposing will be given 30 minutes to present their case. After that, those supporting the bill will be given 30 minutes. We will then take 30 minutes for questions. We will vote. There will be no explanation of votes when we come to the voting period. As you begin your testimony, remember that others behind you are waiting to be heard. All right, with that being said, I would ask that the bill sponsor to please come forward. This is Representative Jennifer Decker. This is an act relating to the protection of children. Representative Decker, I would ask that you please cover the basic parts of your bill. We're not going to get into any testimony that you have from guests at this point. That will be reserved for the last part of the testimony. Ma'am, please introduce yourself for the record, and you have the floor.
Microphone.
My name is State Representative Jennifer Decker. I represent the 58th District. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. It's a pleasure to be with you today. House Bill 470 has a committee sub, and
we have a motion and a second on the sub. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Sub is approved. Please continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to just go down the bill and explain the different sections of the bill and what the bill does. Under Section 1, it creates a new section of KRS 311, and it defines terms to be used later in the bill. Section 2 creates a new section of KRS Chapter 311 to state that the provisions of gender transition services to a person under the age of 18 by a healthcare provider is unethical and unprofessional conduct, and that the provider is unfit to perform the duties and discharge the responsibilities of his or her occupation. The bill provides due process by directing that the disciplinary hearing proceed with each licensing and certification board for medical professionals, and that it use an investigative process and report the provisions of the gender transition services having taken place to look for to see if it had taken place for people under the age of 18. The bill requires revocation of a provider's license and termination of public funding for any public employee if the provision of such services is confirmed in this hearing. Section 3 of the bill, also in the sub, creates a new section of Chapter 311 to require that providers be jointly and severally liable for all damages and costs sustained for providing gender transition services or aiding and assisting another person in providing those services to a person under the age of 18. The bill provides a complete defense to any provider who has any type of complaint filed against him or her because they do not provide these services to children. In Section 3, the bill creates a cause of action by a person who has been harmed or by the parent or guardian of a person before the person reaches 18. The bill requires such an action be brought by the person harmed within 30 years of the person attaining the age of 18, or by the parent or guardian of a person harmed before the person turns 18 years old. The bill also allows a cause of action to be brought by a parent or guardian of the person if the person dies before the expiration of the statute of limitation. Section 4 creates a new section of Chapter 311 to prohibit the use of public funds for gender transition services. And it prohibits a provider employed by the state, local, or county governments to include gender transition services for children under the age of 18. Section 5 creates a new section to Chapter 311, and it permits the Attorney General to bring action to enforce the provisions of this bill. This section also prohibits public employed health care professionals to intervene in any proceeding brought challenging this act. Section 6 creates a new section of Chapter 205 to prohibit Medicaid coverage of gender transition services for persons under the age of 18 years. Section 7 creates a new section of Subtitle 12 of KRS Chapter 304 to establish liability for private insurers that elect to cover gender transition procedures for persons under the age of 18 years. Section 8 amends KRS 18A.225 to prohibit a fully insured benefit plan or self-insured plan for public employees from covering these services for children under the age of 18. Section 9 amends KRS 454.210, that is Kentucky's long-arm statute. It permits a court to exercise personal jurisdiction over a person who has acted directly or by an agent as to a claim arising from a person's engaging in the provision of gender transition services to a person under the age of 18 in our state. Section 10 amends KRS 141.039 to require that corporate income relating to the provision of gender transition services to children be added to the net income. Section 11 amends KRS 213.121 to prohibit a name change on vital statistic documents if the purpose of the name change is to assist a person under the age of 18 with a gender transition. Section 12 prohibits a name change by a court if the purpose is to assist a person under the age of 18 with a gender transition. Section also requires detained juveniles to be classified only as being the biological state of being male or female as defined in this act. Section 14 includes a severability clause. Section 15 allows the act to be cited as the Do No Harm Act. Mr. Chairman, at this time I'd like to ask that Senator Wise, I yield to him to...
Before we do that, I have some,
Okay.
I need to cover some of the changes in the committee sub. On page 1 of the bill, at the bottom, line 25, the words "but are not limited to" have been struck. On page 2, under gender transition services do not include, we have added language, mental health services that address a person's sex or gender, but that do not promote gender transition. And then on page 7, beginning on line 21, We changed the wording there. It now states that public funds shall not be directly or indirectly used, granted, paid, or distributed for gender transition services to persons under the age of 18. And at this point, I would yield to Senator Wise to address other aspects of the committee sub.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you also, Representative Decker. So Senate Bill 150 has already passed out of the Senate chamber, so I'm only going to be discussing what's in the sub, if that's okay, Mr. Chairman, since the actuality of Senate Bill 150 already passed through this legislative body. So if you're following along with me in the sub for members and those also maybe in the audience, pages 30 through 36 are where you're going to find from Section 14 on Senate Bill 150. The changes that were made in the Senate Committee substitute to House Bill 470, the first is on page 31, that being lines 11 through 14, which offers a parent opt-in. So it clarifies that a school shall obtain parental consent prior to referral of a treatment of health services or mental health services related to human sexuality, contraception, or family planning. The next change you'll find is on page 33, lines 13 through 24, which are curriculum additions that we'd already put into place in Senate Bill 150. The local school board policies must include the following. For children in grades 5 and below, that they do not receive any instruction through curriculum or programs on human sexuality or sexually transmitted diseases. Secondly, any child, regardless of grade level, shall not receive any instruction or presentation that has a goal or purpose of students studying or exploring gender identity, gender expression, or sexual orientation. The last portion of the curriculum is a policy to notify a parent in advance and obtain the parent's written consent before the parent's child in grade 6 or above receives any instruction through curriculum or programs on human sexuality or sexually transmitted diseases authorized in the section. The last change made in the sub is on privacy rights. You can find this in section 16, which are lines 20 through 27 on page 35, and on the last page on page 36, lines 2 through 14. We live in a time right now where parents have the expectation and the students have an expectation of a right to privacy of undressing in front of members of the opposite biological sex. This may be in a bathroom, this may be in a locker room, this may be in a shower room. So local school boards must develop and adopt a privacy policy aligned with those expectations and those privacy rights as it relates to restrooms, locker rooms, or shower rooms. Parents are demanding and are expecting that we have policies in place at the school board level to handle situations of boys and girls in restrooms and in locker rooms and in shower rooms, of that expectation of privacy and also an expectation of safety. Mr. Chairman, that is what the committee sub does from Senate Bill 150. I'm happy to answer any questions if they may arise. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Wise. I would ask Representative Decker to please take your seat. I'm going to call up at names as they appear on the sign-up list. Keep in mind, we are timing 30 minutes. So whatever time you take is taking away from someone else's ability to express their views on this issue. And I'm going to start at the top of the list. Jerry Miller. Y'all help me time this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Please introduce yourself for the record, sir, and it's good to have you here today. Good to see you again.
Thank
and
you.
You have the floor.
I am Jerry Miller, former state representative. Retired from the legislature last year, never really wanted to come back to Frankfort unless it was to go to Buffalo Trace. But nonetheless, HB 470, when I realized it had a real chance of passing, even though it restricts parents' rights, it now became personal because my 7-year-old grandchild would be directly affected by it. I want to center my testimony on the personal experience of my wife and I. As a grandfather of 2 girls, I was thrilled to learn my daughter was pregnant with a boy. I thought of all the things we would do together, like playing ball. That's just not been my reality. As a toddler, he wasn't interested in balls. She has focused on dolls, not balls. He started dressing a girl like a girl, mainly princess dresses, at age 3 at home. His mother tried to dissuade him from doing so at age 4. My intuitive wife asked the dress-wearing child if he didn't like being a boy. His response was, quote, "Inside, I feel like a girl," close quote. My wife accepted that Jonah was different well before I did. I thought it was because he had an older sister that he was competing with. I hoped he would grow out of it, but that has not happened. At daycare, his friends were all girls. Do I wish he were a, quote, normal boy? Absolutely yes. But Jonah is not. I still screw up the pronoun thing, but regardless of anything, I'm going to love my grandchild and fight for what I think is best for Jonah. For that reason, and I apologize, I have not seen the sub, but as the version presented by Representative Decker, I urge you to vote against that. The government has no compelling interest here in violating parents' rights. Kentucky Constitution says that we should seek, Section 1 says we are able to seek and pursue safety and happiness. And I ask you, where's Kentucky's compelling government interest in not letting a parent protect their own children's safety and happiness? Every study you see them on both sides, and I'm not going to talk about studies, but I know this has a real potential to impact Jonah, my grandson. While I know some therapies, and I'm really just talking about the hormonal therapy, and I know it can have side effects, but every drug you see advertised on television has side effects. That's the point of disclaimers. But puberty is irreversible. By the time Jonah is 18, beard, Adam's apple, deeper voice, and if it goes like often goes, he'll be persecuted for that if he dresses as a girl. I voted for SB 83 last year to protect girls' sports, and I thought that was the best for my granddaughter, who is a 3-sport athlete. That said, HB 470 will not, quote, do no harm, close quote. Quite the opposite. This bill condemns vulnerable children to an even more difficult life than they've already been born into. Please don't let a parent's right to protect their children be collateral damage in the culture wars. If you won't amend the bill to protect a parent's right to choose, I beg you to vote no. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Miller. Bob Hellringer. Please introduce yourself for the record, and you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Bob Hellringer, Louisville, Kentucky. I represent the Fairness Campaign in this legislative session. I live in the 19th Senate District. The last Senate committee I appeared in front of, we didn't have a senator represent me. We now have one. Wow, I don't know how to begin. The committee sub has combined multiple examples of discrimination against a very small minority in Kentucky, and it's a disgrace. I've been around this legislature since 1978 when I worked on the staff of the Republican Senate caucus that had all of 8 members. Then I became a member of the House, served 23 years. I took 2 years off to run for lieutenant governor on a ticket with a House colleague of mine, Steve Nunn. And then I've been a lobbyist since that time. I've never seen a bill in 45 years as despicable as this one. It codifies discrimination. It's a rank obscenity on the reputation of the people's branch of government, the Kentucky General Assembly. I guess I could ask you to think about it and to vote against it. This reminds me of the case I studied in law school, the Korematsu case. During World War II, when America rounded up all the Japanese American citizens on the West Coast because of the war, hysteria. They'd done nothing wrong. They had no evidence against them, but they were discriminated against, but not because of who they were, but because of what they were. And it was upheld by our United States Supreme Court in a 6-3 decision, signed by two of the most liberal justices ever, William O. Douglas and Hugo Black. And they regretted that decision. Without their votes, that becomes one of the greatest decisions in the history of the United States Supreme Court. One of the dissenting justices, Frank Murphy, called it rank racism. First time the word racism ever appeared in a United States Supreme Court opinion. That's what we're doing here. We're isolating gay people, transgender children. We're not sending them to relocation centers, perhaps, but in theory we are. We're isolating them. We're ostracizing them. We're humiliating them with this kind of legislation. We're intruding, even down to the pronouns they can use, what bathrooms they can use. I heard Senator Wise say parents are demanding this kind of legislation. Where are they? None of them have come to Frankfort. There were 4 hours worth of hearings on Senator Wise's Senate Bill 150, which apparently is running into some kind of trouble because now we got to piggyback it onto this bill. 4 hours of hearings. Not a parent, not a PTA official, not a school superintendent, not a principal, not a teacher, nobody, a counselor, nobody came to Frankfort and said, we need a bill like this. You're doing it because you can. You don't like certain groups of people. They puzzle you. You don't understand them. You haven't tried to understand them. And yet they are people that walk and live in your district. You know, those two justices I told you that signed on, they later regretted that. I don't want you to regret your vote today. I don't want you to be like them. I want you to be like Frank Murphy today and vote for justice in real time today and not 10 years from now. Oh, wow. Why did I vote for that? Because you know what? If this pernicious bill becomes law, I can tell you with every confidence it will be repealed by a future legislature. And they will be embarrassed. And a governor will get up like President Reagan did in 1988 and apologized and signed a bill for reparations for the Japanese Americans. And President Reagan said the same thing that the governor will say when they pass a bill to repeal this. We're sorry. We're sorry that happened. And it will never happen again. I don't want you to regret what you're going to do today. I want you to be a Frank Murphy and do what's right, that you know deep down is right, and that is to vote against this contemptible bill. It's beneath the dignity of the high office you hold. Abraham Lincoln, the co-founder of my Republican Party, said one time, if slavery isn't wrong, nothing is wrong. If this bill isn't wrong, nothing is wrong. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hellringer. Next on the list, Dr. Bobby Glass. Please introduce yourself for the record, and you have the floor.
Right. I'm Dr. Bobby Glass. I'm from Louisville. You are hearing from medical and mental health professionals about LGBTQ youth, mental health, and suicide. You heard from your own colleague, Senator Karen Berg, how this constant barrage of legislated hate caused her son Henry to take his own life at the age of 24. None of this has fazed you. I sense that most of you can't wait for this hearing to finish so that you can pull the trigger on House Bill 470 and send it to the floor to be passed before this day is over. So what in the world can I do with my 2 or 3 minutes here? I'm in the 46th year of exceptional child education. I have spent my whole life working with kids and adults whose brains and bodies are wired so differently that they are qualified for exceptionalities. I'm a college professor, and I just took early retirement from JCPS, where I was a special resource teacher to adolescents who are hospitalized in the state agency system of psychiatric residential facilities. I'm talking about places like Our Lady of Peace, Brooklawn, Tenbrook, Maryhurst. Those are kids that have become unfit to attend public school because they've got so much going on to them. But the number of LGBTQ adolescents coming into those facilities for attempted suicide and persistent self-harm has skyrocketed over my past 5 years there. I'm furious at the number of kids that I am teaching who are actively trying to kill themselves. I have to chart what they're doing every 15 minutes. I have to check their pockets when they come in the room and when they leave the room, because they're looking for anything they can find, like a staple or the little wire out of their face mask, or a pencil somebody left on the floor so they can take the brass band off of that, anything they can find to cut themselves. They are actively trying to kill themselves because the bullying and the lack of hope is so relentless and so persistent in this state. And I am telling you, I have worked with kids who have killed themselves. I'm not talking about statistics from the psych journals. I'm talking about dead children. In the first 2 months of 2023 in Jefferson County, we've had 3 LGBTQ students kill themselves. 2 at Doss High School in 1 month because of the relentless bullying and the absolute lack of hope that they have. So let me tell you why they're trying to kill themselves, and why. The first thing is relentless bullying. And so Senate Bill 150, which Senator Wise says, oh, there's no hate at all in this bill. Well, I'm telling you, none of us are feeling the love, Senator. It's like the relentless bullying. You are legalizing disrespect. You are giving adults in the building permission to say, oh, my religion forbids me from talking to you that way, and I don't care how often I've got to hurt you or humiliate you if it's comfortable to me. I want to teach everybody around me to disrespect you. Your safety isn't important, and more than anything, I am not an adult that you can trust. I'm not an ally. I'm not a friend. That's the message that these adults are going to be doing. That is relentless bullying, because it teaches everybody around them, hey, it's okay to pile on so-and-so. The other thing is the hopelessness over gender-affirming care and how they really need to stop their adolescence. Well, I'm openly transgender. I was born 72 years ago east of here in the Appalachian coalfields. There was no gender-affirming care when I was a kid, and so I'm a perfect example of why these kids are wanting to kill themselves when you force them to go through adolescence. I'm the size of an Amazon. By the time I'm 18 years old, I'm over 6 feet tall. My hands are fully grown. My feet are fully grown. I've got body hair, facial hair, Adam's apple. My voice has changed. All of that stuff is irreversible damage. You are claiming that this bill is stopping irreversible damage, but you are doing irreversible damage to these kids because you're forcing them to go through puberty. You're forcing them to deal with all of this stuff that they've got to undo. Well, I got to tell you, I've worked 2 full-time jobs. That's what it took, and I was 60 before I could finally afford all this stuff. I have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars. And that's why kids are trying to kill themselves. It's like, oh my gosh, I'll never make it if I've got to wait that long. And so I want you to understand, those 3 kids that killed themselves in JCPS in January and February, get ready, because it is going to avalanche if you pass this bill. They have had it. And finally, the other thing I want to do, I said I was openly transgender. Well, in biblical terms, I would have been called a eunuch. And I like that term, eunuch. And I want to challenge every one of you who claims to be a Bible believer to go back home and study eunuchs throughout the Bible. They are both and neither, male or female. They have been called to live exceptional lives where Participating in procreation is not going to be part of the plan, but they're called to live exceptional lives. I especially want you to focus on what Jesus himself says in Matthew 19, where he said, some people are born eunuchs. God and I did that intentionally. We create people that are both and neither, male and female. We have called them to live an exceptional life. And what you're doing is you're pulling the rug out from underneath of those, because somebody told you there's only 6 out of 1,000 kids that are transgender. And you can declare war on them. You can make culture wars. You can have a big day. You're going to get reelected. Well, I'm telling you right now, these kids, you are forcing them into early graves. You're forcing them to leave this state and never come back. But the main thing you're doing is forcing them into early graves, because they're going to develop all kinds of trouble, substance abuse, risky behavior, on and on and on, because the pain is so intense. You are the ones that are about to legislate irreversible damage, because 98% of the kids that begin gender affirming care continue it well after they're 18 years old. It is one of the most successful interventions medicine has come up to. If there was any other procedure you wanted to get for your children, and I said, oh, well, 98% of the people love it, have no regrets. The AMA approves it, the APA approves it, the American Academy of Pediatrics approves it, it's great. You say, praise holy God. But when it comes to something you don't understand and you refuse to understand, like gender diversity and sexual orientation, you say, well, I know as much as God on this one, so go home, read your Bibles. I need to shut up. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Glass. Dr. Bowling and Dr. Grimes, do you all wish to speak? Please introduce yourselves for the record, and you have the floor. We have about 15 minutes remaining.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Christopher Bowling, MD. I'm representing the Kentucky Medical Association and the Kentucky chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics, which you may remember from our previous name also, the Kentucky Pediatric Society. These two Kentucky organizations have been in the Commonwealth for decades and have been fierce defenders of patients and their health care. Last week, when House Bill 470 was in committee, I, along with scores of other Kentucky healthcare providers and Kentucky families, pleaded and begged the House Judiciary Committee to not pass House Bill 470 out of committee. Backed by standards set forth by the American Medical Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics and its 75,000 members, the American College of Physicians, the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology, the World Professional Association for Transgender Health, the American Psychological Association, the Pediatric Endocrine Society, the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, and others, we advocated forcefully against House Bill 470's ban on patients and parents accessing what is considered to be the standard of care for patients with gender dysphoria. Care, which I must add, has never included surgical procedures on Kentucky patients under age 18 or medical hormone therapy under 18 without full parental consent, thorough mental health evaluation, and ongoing medical monitoring. You will hear from testimony today from people who claim that they got what sounds like very substandard care to me. I asked you, please talk with Kentucky youth and families. That is not the standard of care that they have received at transgender clinics. I was shocked and saddened that the Judiciary Committee and later the Kentucky House left the pleas of Kentucky healthcare providers, Kentucky patients, and parents unheard, and instead chose to follow guidance from discredited and fringe out-of-state organizations. Now that this bill is disenfranchising Kentucky families has made it to the Senate and appears poised to become law in Kentucky, I am here again to implore you not to pass this piece of legislation. Make no mistake, by passing House Bill 470, the Kentucky legislature is choosing to ban provision of gender care services over the advice of and evidence from practicing Kentucky healthcare providers, numerous national medical organizations, and the pleas of Kentucky parents and patients. Another implication of this misguided bill demands the committee's attention. I recently retired after serving as a pediatrician in Northern Kentucky for over 30 years. I founded my practice with a friend, dedicating ourselves to Kentucky families. We grew into Kentucky's largest single specialty pediatric group with 14 pediatricians, 10 advanced practice providers, several mental health providers, 3 offices in 3 counties, about 100 employees, serving 15,000 families at any given time. If you choose to make House Bill 470 the law in Kentucky, you are putting providers like us in an impossible situation. I'm incredibly grateful to be retired because I have time to be here to advocate for my former patients and their families, but also because I do not have to practice in a situation where I'm forced to choose. Either violate my professional obligation to refer and provide for recognized standard of care, or lose my license to practice in Kentucky at all. This body has for many years tried to pass legislation that helps ease our Commonwealth's shortage of healthcare providers. When the legislature feels compelled to set out its own medical standards that are in direct opposition to medical science, it will chase away qualified providers who are practicing or are looking to practice in Kentucky. I do not know how I could have continued to practice if House Bill 470 were on the books, or how Kentucky physicians will in the future. And as with many of our healthcare challenges in Kentucky, these effects would be most severe in our already underserved areas. We do not need further impediments in attracting providers to our state. In conclusion, you have a choice. Either listen to Kentuckians, their healthcare providers, and evidence-based medicine, or enter the realm where politicians declare the science settled, decide based on your opinion what medical standard of care is, and deny Kentucky patients and parents their rights to guide their own health care. The choice is yours. Please defeat House Bill 450, and thank you.
Thank you, Chair Carroll and members of the committee. My name is Dr. Laurie Mount Grimes. I'm a pediatric psychologist, and I'm here today representing the Kentucky Psychological Association. KPA opposes the practice of singling out a very small and vulnerable group of people and denying them health care. KPA opposes denying parents their right to access health services and care for their children as they see fit. KPA opposes jeopardizing the state's recruitment and retention of healthcare providers, medical and mental health, by usurping years of training, legal regulations, practice guidelines, standards of care, and ethical codes with a single law. KPA opposes knowingly inflicting harm on children and their developing minds. KPA opposes willfully looking the other way as children decide they don't have tolerable futures ahead of them and take their own lives. KPA opposes HB 470 because this would be its legacy. The support for this legislation comes from the underlying belief that trans is not a real thing, that God only makes girls or boys, and it's evident at birth. Even if you don't think trans is right, it doesn't change the fact that there are still children who are suffering and wondering and feeling different, and they need help and support. Evidence-based gender-affirming care actually buys time for kids and families so that they can receive therapy and medical care as they determine their needs. The suicide statistic is well known. Trans people commit suicide at 4 times the rate of non-trans people. But use the iceberg image, with suicide being the tip of the iceberg visible above the water. And the massive block of ice below the surface represents the rampant mental health symptoms of trans kids denied treatment and support. Depression, anxiety, stress, isolation, self-hatred, family conflict, all of which prevent kids from tending to the work of childhood and adolescence, like learning, growing, and making friends. HB 470 will leave these kids with no support. HB 470's reach is so broad and intrusive that it purports to supersede laws and regulations established by this very General Assembly to license and govern medical and therapeutic practice. Mental and medical health providers are bound by ethical principles and statutory authority to do no harm, Respect the dignity and rights of people. Maintain confidentiality. Not discriminate, not harass or demean people, and minimize intrusion of privacy. Yet HB 470 would severely punish providers for adhering to evidence-based treatment protocols, state law, and professional ethics codes. They could face career-destroying actions for supporting a child in need. Providers would lose their jobs, their license, and their livelihood. Trans people will lose their lives. HB 470 is wrong for the 0.5% of people who identify as trans, and it's wrong for the state of Kentucky. Vote no on 470. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bowling, Dr. Grimes. We have about 4 minutes. Dr. Craig Losekamp, did I pronounce? I apologize. You have about 3.5 minutes. Please introduce yourself for the record, and you have the floor.
I'm Dr. Craig Loskamp. I'm from Bowling Green. I'm Dr. Craig Loskamp. I'm from Bowling Green, Kentucky. I provide gender-affirming care for adults. President Ronald Reagan said the 9 most terrifying words in the English language are, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help." This interferes with the livelihood of doctors and their patients. Just on March 3rd, the official GOP Twitter account said, "Government should be so small you don't even realize it's there." This is incredibly large. It's incredibly in the way. It interferes with parents and the rights that they have to help their children. They're trying to keep their kids alive. One of the big conservative talking points is that parents have rights, that family is the foundation of American society. This interrupts that very thing for them. This gets between me, the patient, and the parents. It's going to increase the risk for them to die. This is also a bill that most Kentuckians do not want. 71% of Kentuckians do not support this bill, and 68%, I believe, of Republicans oppose this. The last time it was before the House committee, there were several people who testified on behalf of the bill. Only one was from Kentucky. The other ones were from Arkansas, California, and I believe Nebraska. They were from out of the state. We only had one person from here. This was full of people from Kentucky who wanted to show their resistance to this bill. And I want to give Dr. Berg a moment to talk.
Thank you. Good morning, and I really, really appreciate the chance to address this committee for a minute. As you know, I'm Dr. Karen Berg. I'm a board-certified diagnostic radiologist, but I'm actually here as the mother of a trans child who did not make it. And I want to take 2 minutes to share our journey with you.
You do have 2 minutes.
2 minutes, sir. 2-day twos, preschool. We're getting ready for the first time for my child to go for 2 days a week to preschool. It's orientation. We're at my synagogue. We're a religious family. And at one point, the director of the preschool calls the children up to the pulpit. Boys to the right, girls to the left. My little 2-year-old child goes straight up to the right with the boys. My husband and I are sitting there, our mouths are dropping. We are like, what is going on? So the preschool director takes my little child by the hand, takes him across the room, puts him with the girls. The kid has a look on their face like, what's going on? Immediately crosses back over and goes to the boys. My husband and I were so concerned that we talked to the preschool director immediately afterwards. What is going on? Is this little 2-year-old child telling us that they are gay? Had I known, and this was 20 plus years ago, guys, had I known, and I didn't know, as a physician, I did not know to recognize that my child was trans. Lined up with the boys at potty every day got taken over to the girls' side. Wanted to play with hot cars and planes, all sorts of dress-up clothes. Didn't want them. I still did not know. Maybe I didn't want to know. 14th child comes out, says, "Mom, you should have known. I have always been a boy inside." By
Senator
that
Berger,
time,
time is up. I apologize.
can I finish
No,
one?
ma'am. We're going to stick to the rules today. Thank you so much. I would ask Representative Decker to please come back to the table. And ma'am, you will have 25 minutes left. Please introduce the guests that you wish to testify and in the order you wish them to speak.
Yes, I'm sorry, should I introduce them all at this point?
No, just as you speak, introduce yourself for the record.
First witness will be Dr. Van Mol. He is with the American College of Pediatricians. He is from out of town. There are doctors in this town who would testify, but they would lose their job at their hospitals. So Dr. Von Mars first.
Ladies, this is warning number one. You will not get a second one.
Hello, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm Dr. Andre Van Mol, a board-certified family physician. I would have you know that gender, and I would have you think of it as transition-affirming medical interventions, actually imperil already at-risk gender dysphoric youth with experimental and unproven hormonal and surgical procedures which medicalize prematurely and permanently. Transition interventions are not proven effective, not proven safe, do not reduce suicides, and are actually not the standard of care for gender dysphoria. Scientific and legal evidence is driving an international pushback against interventions in favor of intensive psychological evaluation and support, and the lawsuits over the harms of transition have begun. Gender dysphoria carries the overwhelming likelihood of underlying mental health problems, adverse childhood experiences, family issues, and impressively higher rates of autism spectrum disorder, all of which usually predate the onset of gender dysphoria. The governments and medical institutions of the United Kingdom, Sweden, Finland, and last week Norway have rejected prioritizing gender-affirming transition in favor of emphasizing extended mental health evaluation and support. And the UK closed the world's largest pediatric gender clinic due to findings of their Cass Review interim report. Desistance is the norm for minors with trans identification, resolving on its own for an average of 85% by adulthood, unless, of course, it is affirmed. And why would we permanently medicalize a child for a condition that usually goes away? Transition-affirming medical interventions are not the standard of care for gender dysphoria. Pro-transition guidelines usually derive from WPATH, which is neither a scientific nor a medical organization, but an advocacy group whose standards of care should not be considered standards of care just because they call them such.
Doctor, can you please hold up?
Yes.
That is your warning. Please continue, sir.
Yes. The latest SOC 8 version removed age restrictions for medical and surgical interventions. Now, conversely, the 2017 Endocrine Society guidelines were the first from an actual medical organizations, and they specify this disclaimer on page 3895, quote, "The guidelines cannot guarantee any specific outcome, nor do they establish a standard of care," close quote. Transition interventions are not the standard of care. Minors cannot give truly informed consent. They have developing brains. Their minds change often, and they don't grasp long-term consequences. A UK High Court in Bell versus Tavistock specified there is no age-appropriate way to explain to many of these children what losing their fertility or full sexual function may mean to them in later years. Puberty-blocking agents chemically sterilize at the level of the brain. Puberty blockers risk infertility by blocking the maturing of sperm and eggs. Following them with cross-sex hormones guarantees sterility. Puberty blockers compromise bone mineral density at what should be their period of peak increase. They hinder brain development, they compromise sexual function. Self-harm does not improve on puberty blockers. and puberty blockers are not proven to be fully reversible. Long-term complications are already known. As for cross-sex hormones, estrogen use in male biology strongly increases the risk of blood clots, heart attacks, strokes, breast cancer, insulin resistance, and more, and that risk increases dramatically with the length of use. Testosterone use in female biology strongly increases the risks of heart attack, strokes, breast and uterine cancer, hypertension, severe acne, and more. Many regret transition. Many claim their consent lacked information on risks and alternatives, but what's gone is gone by that point. And pro-transition studies commonly share the same fatal flaws, resulting in low-quality, untrustworthy data. You shouldn't trust them. Suicide reduction claims of transition are a myth used as emotional blackmail. Many parents report to us that they were told regarding their gender-confused youth by a medical health official or a mental health professional, do you want a live son or a dead daughter? Would you rather be planning a transition or a funeral? But sex researchers Bailey and Blanchard note that there is no persuasive evidence that gender transition reduces gender dysphoric children's likelihood of killing themselves. A 2011 Swedish study of all of their post-sex reassignment adults showed a completed suicide rate, if you follow them 10 years out, that was 19 times higher than the general population. And they had 3 times the rate of psychiatric inpatient care. A 2020 general Swedish study by Brancham and Pachankas ultimately showed that neither gender-affirming hormone treatment nor gender-affirming surgery improved any of the mental health benchmarks they were looking at. There is no one reason for suicide. The US CDC has warned for over 30 years against, quote, presenting simplistic representations of suicide. Suicide is never the result of a single factor or event, but rather results from a complex interaction of many factors and usually involves a history of psychosocial problems. In conclusion, the chemical sterilization and surgical mutilation of otherwise healthy young bodies is not healthcare. Transition-affirming medical interventions are being rejected by the very nations that formally embrace them. These interventions are unproven child experimentation masquerading as something better. Minors should be protected for them. I ask you to please support HB 470, and I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Doctor.
Mr. Chairman, next will be Jeanette Cooper. Introduce yourself.
Please introduce yourself for the record and proceed.
Yes, my name. Can you hear me? Oh, thank you. Yes, my name is Jeanette Cooper. I am here to state my support of House Bill 470 on behalf of Partners for Ethical Care, a secular, nonpartisan, all-volunteer, nonprofit organization. I have members in the state of Kentucky who I've been texting with in the last few minutes. I am here on their behalf, not to state my personal testimony. They are not here because they are afraid that they will suffer my fate, which I have lost the custody of my only child because of this issue. Parents are asked, would you rather have a living son or a dead daughter? It is the greatest fear of every parent to outlive her own child. It makes sense for a parent to choose a physically harmful intervention when they are faced with that choice from unethical and misinformed healthcare providers. It makes sense for a mother to choose a sterile, de-sexed child over a dead child. It makes sense for a parent to consent to the removal of healthy breasts rather than the removal of her daughter's body from the morgue. It makes sense when a parent is surrounded by people repeating the mantra of life-saving care. The fear is immense, and it is nearly unbearable. But this is the suicide myth, which assumes only 2 options, transition or suicide. That is a false dichotomy. There are always more than 2 options. But stopping normal puberty, administering wrong sex hormones, and removing healthy body parts should never be an option, not in any state. No doctor should be removing a healthy finger, healthy leg, or healthy breasts from anyone. Gender dysphoria is a psychological problem that deserves ethical psychological care. It is impossible to be born in the wrong body. The mind is part of the body, not separate from it. I help run an online group of thousands of parents who do not affirm their child's transgender identity. Rather, we support our children's social, emotional, and physical needs as human beings in their natural male and female bodies. We let our kids wear what they want, cut their hair however they please. We accept and love our children as lesbian or gay. I myself do not shave, do not wear a bra, have never worn makeup. I am also a general contractor. I guess that makes me a man in some people's eyes. but women can do all of those things and still be women. We are liberal, like me, and conservative. We are atheist, like me, and religious. We are former Democrats, like me, and former Republicans. We are a diverse group of parents. I am not aware of any children of parents in our group who have committed suicide because they were not affirmed. On the contrary, we observe hundreds of children who recover from gender dysphoria and thrive once they don't need the crutch of a transgender identity, after their underlying mental and physical health issues are addressed with legitimate and ethical care. We know how to resolve gender dysphoria without harming healthy bodies, and it works, provided children are not encouraged to believe a falsehood. In other private online groups, sadly, we have read accounts from parents who have affirmed their child's transgender identity, but their children's mental health still did not improve and their physical health deteriorated. Some have committed suicide. I have talked to some of those parents. We have read many, many accounts of the coming suicides that Dr. Van Mol refers to. The promises of transition joy didn't save the lives of these young people. It was snake oil. I am here with observations of personal experiences from thousands of parents who have had trans-identified children, and that we know what prevents suicide, and it's not affirmation. We know how to support children who identify as transgender, and it is not affirmation. Using someone's chosen pronouns is not going to save their life, just like someone's birth name is not going to cause their suicide. That's not how suicide works. In order...
Hold up just a second. Trooper, could you please remove the lady that is straight in front of me, the African-American lady? Ma'am, that's you. Who was it that was speaking then? Please remove her. Yeah. It was? Okay. That is your first warning. Folks, please understand, trying to prevent us from hearing clearly the opposing side does nothing for your credibility. Please be courteous. Please continue.
Mr. Chairman, could we have back our time that we've lost? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. In order to have a completed suicide, according to Jack Klott, a suicidologist with over 45 years' experience and with whom I spent an entire day learning about suicide, a person will have all four of these things in order to have a completed suicide. They must have hopelessness, aloneness, self-hatred, and an inability to cope. Suicide is complex. It is not about names and pronouns. Contrary to the popular myth told and retold, pronouns do not literally save lives. There is no injection, not wrong sex hormones or anything else, that can be given to prevent suicide. Suicide prevention is about social and psychological supports, not surgeries, which you are doing in this state, because I had a parent call your clinic and ask to get a double mastectomy for her 15-year-old. She recorded that call, and we will provide it to you. It's about changing your mind, not irreversibly changing your body. Gender medicine is the latest miracle drug sold to desperate parents and young people. I wish it was a miracle cure, but it's not. I feel for the parents and young people who have been emotionally coerced into believing this lie. It is not true. No one needs gender medicine, and no one must kill themselves if they don't get it. This isn't life-saving care. Lastly, we want to tell young people and their parents, you can and will survive the psychological and emotional pain that you feel at this moment. You and your children deserve ethical care, and we are deeply sorry that you are not getting it from the professionals you should be able to trust. We trust that this state will vote to protect the children of Kentucky from this multi-billion-dollar unethical gender industry. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next will be Kelly Wagner.
Hello. Dear Chair
Please
Carroll.
introduce yourself for the record before you
My name
begin.
is Kelly Wagner. Dear Chair Carroll and Vice Chair Adams and honorable senators of the state of Kentucky, members of the Family and Children's Committee, thank you for your service and thank you for the opportunity to testify as a proponent regarding House Bill 470 today. I am here to speak today because children should not be experimented on. All people deserve love, respect, and dignity, and I come today to you to speak in truth and love. Children should not be making life-altering decisions on their body when they are not old enough to understand the long-term consequences of their decisions, and including sterilization. Puberty is a natural process of human development. It is not a disease that needs to be medically treated. Growing up, I always played sports, and sometimes I wore men's workout clothes. I progressed to wearing men's daily wear in college, and as a biological female, I did not conform to gender norms. I believed I was born gay. I was in relationships with females for several years at the end of my youth and into my young adulthood years. I struggled with many things, including fear, anxiety, depression, eating disorders, and sometimes I battled with suicidal thoughts. I did not want to have kids when I grew up, and I hated parts of my body. I would often proclaim to friends, I hate my chest. One day I will get a breast reduction. That's all that was available at the time. I heard about it and I wanted to get one. I've heard on the internet and social media that there are statements that people have heard, if you hate your body, you are trans. People have testified that they've heard that, they've believed that, and then they acted on that in medical intervention and experimentation ways. I am so thankful that I never heard words like that back then. It is hard to believe, but when I was growing up, there was no internet, no cell phone, no personal computers, and no social media. Many children will grow out, as the doctor mentioned, of gender confusion and dysphoria without gender-affirming care. I was one of them. I had the chance to grow up. I was given the time for my brain to develop. And I am very thankful that no one ever told me that ending my life as a female and attempting to become a male would ease my pain, body hatred, depression, anxiety, or my suicidal thoughts that I battled with often. I would have been very, very vulnerable to those suggestions and seeds, those words, because I was looking for anything that would bring me peace in this world. When I was 24, people spoke truth and love to me, and those encounters encouraged me to seek healing for the wounded heart that I had and the pain and the root issues that were causing that pain. I grew over time to love my body and to appreciate it, operating as a healthy and whole woman. I am very thankful today, and I could offer my body as a gift to my husband in our marriage. However, because of a totally unrelated reason, nothing to do with this, my husband and I received a sterile diagnosis as a couple. And I know firsthand, I can testify to the experience of immense suffering that diagnosis causes when your heart changes and your mind changes and you want to have children and a generation and a legacy one day. Please do not allow these things to be done to children that do not understand. I did not want children. Did you hear me? I did not want children. Now I do. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before you as a proponent of House Bill 470 today. I strongly urge you to vote in favor. Please vote yes for this good bill to protect children. They cannot understand those decisions. Thank you for your time today. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next, we have Prisha Mosley. She's on Zoom. Prisha?
Hi, my name is Prisha Mosley. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please introduce yourself for the record, and then you may continue.
Yes, sir. My name is Prisha Mosley. I'm just representing myself and gender nonconforming people and detrans people. By the time I was 15 years old, I was suffering from multiple diagnosed mental illnesses, including borderline personality disorder and anorexia nervosa. I was suicidal, self-harming, and hated myself. These conditions and my age made me extremely impressionable and suggestible. It was at this time that the trans community found me and convinced me that all of my suffering was because I was born in the wrong body. By the time I was 17, I was being medicalized by a pediatrician with the high dose of testosterone. 1 year later, my healthy breasts were removed. The appointment with my gender therapist was only 15 minutes long. When I walked in, my letter of recommendation was already typed up on her computer, and she was filling in my name in minutes. I had been seeing a regular therapist for several years for my mental disorders. Even she said that all of my conditions were caused by being born in the wrong body. My parents were lied to and manipulated by the same therapists and my doctors. They were told to choose between a dead daughter and a living son. I had already attempted suicide by this time, and this was held over them as proof that they were not affirming me enough. Doctors said that if I was not medicalized, I would try to kill myself again. Testosterone caused severe emotional and physical issues. It made my emotions harder to control and understand, and even affected my sexuality. My body burns all of the time due to the changes it caused. My hips are so small that they cannot support the weight of my painfully overgrown shoulders. Being disproportionate like this causes constant pain and clumsiness. I almost lost my nipples after my top surgery. During this procedure, which is done on minors, the nipples are removed, cut up, and reshaped and frozen while the chest is scraped before being reattached to the chest. One day, I pulled back my bandages to change them, and half of my nipples were attached to the bandage. I am missing pieces of them now. I now experience phantom breast syndrome. It is the worst at night. When I am lying in bed, there is an empty space against my scarred chest. I feel my breasts as they were before being cut off. It hurts and it adds to my grief. I am also probably sterile, but no doctors will touch me now. I also suffered hair loss on top of my head and hair growth on my body, which I have to treat with laser hair removal. Insurance does not cover this. My endocrine system is ruined. I cannot regulate my own hormones because of the years of testosterone abuse. On top of this, I am experiencing severe vaginal atrophy. It is painful and it scares me. It causes me to tear and bleed. No doctors will help me fix this, and insurance is paying for nothing. I am turned away everywhere I go. There aren't even medical codes for detrans people, so we don't know how many there are, and there is no one to help us with our physical suffering, which was caused by transition. The medical system which did this to me has completely abandoned me. I don't understand how my doctors could look at the cuts all over my body and decide to cut me up even more. I'm covered in scars now, in a body that hurts and is not mine, and there is no way to go back. I fully support a bill that saves children from so-called gender-affirming care.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next will be Luca Hine.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes, please introduce yourself for the record, and you have the floor.
Go, Luca.
Okay. My name is Luca Hine, and I was a trans kid. You know, I was a vulnerable young person with a history of mental health issues who had been extremely preyed upon, groomed, and sexually exploited online to the point of police involvement. I spiraled into a hatred of my body and myself, which ended in me truly believing that I was just a boy born in the wrong body. The professionals ignored my actual issues and instead affirmed me down a path of medicalization, not asking why I felt the need to escape my body at such a young age. At 16, the very first medical intervention I ever had was a double mastectomy. And then a few months later, I was put on testosterone, which I took for 4 years. Now at 20, I wish I could go back, but there is irreversible damage done. I live now with constant joint pain. My vocal cords ache. I never know if I will be able to carry a child. And these are just a few of the many things I will have to deal with for possibly the rest of my life. I was not able to consent to this, due to both my age and my mental health issues at the time. My parents were baited and bullied, told, "Would you rather have a dead daughter or a living son?" Those are not the words of a medical professional, but the words of an activist. Children deserve to be able to grow up. Children deserve to be able to feel safe. It is in direct defense of a child's life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness to defend their ability to grow up whole. And it is time for the adults in the room to take a stand, because those who swore an oath to do no harm have failed. I wish I could be there today. And even if I could, I'm not sure I feel completely safe coming back to your capital due to what happened last time I came to testify. But I will still call in, and I will be here to share my experience and defend children, because they are worth it and they deserve that chance to grow up. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Decker, you have about 2 minutes if you want to wrap it up. Hold on just a second. You have a warning.
I'm sorry, I could not understand
You
what you
have
said.
2 minutes if you want to wrap it up, or whichever way you want to use those 2 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I asked this committee to listen to the life stories of people who have been through this and those who have escaped it, to go on to productive lives, who are glad that they were not in a time when this was the care that was given. All of the people who testified from the medical profession, one of them even said, this hurts their financial bottom line. This is a multi-billion-dollar industry which is expected to grow exponentially over the next few years. And one of the explanations given to the market forecaster for this growth was, as we do these surgeries and treatments, they will grow. There will be more and more. And that is what they're hoping. If you happen to see when Vanderbilt University was thinking about opening a gender clinic, the discussions with the medical staff were not about this life-giving care. It was about the bottom line. It was about the costs. It was about the expected income from the patients, and it is huge. So when you hear medical professionals who are defending their practices, they are also defending their bottom line. Not one word was spoken at Vanderbilt about the risks, about the children, about their health. It was the bottom line. I submit that this is the business of government, to protect the most vulnerable of its citizens. Parents have rights, and I defend those. No parent has a right to cause irreparable harm or allow it to their child. We don't allow parents to give their children alcohol. We don't allow parents to give their children cigarettes. We don't turn over our car keys to our children. It's not allowed in Kentucky, and this should not be allowed either. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I ask the committee to vote yes.
Thank you, Representative Decker. Do we have questions from members of the committee? Okay. We are going to stand at ease for a couple minutes. We've got members that are away in other committees before we call this to a vote.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman. I also have another committee that I'm waiting on. Can we move forward?
No, we will hold off just a minute. They're on their way.
Mr. Chairman, is it also true that we cannot explain our votes?
It is.
I've never had that happen to me in almost 20 years. Thank you.
Representative or Senator, I'm sorry. Due to the time that we have remaining because of questions, I will allow that today. We should have time to do that. Okay, Senator Rocky Adams is on her way back, so we'll call the meeting back to order. And do I have a motion on the bill? Motion. Have a motion by Senator Tishner. Second? Second. Senator Wise. Again, because we do have time remaining, we did not have questions. You will be allowed to explain your vote. You will have 3 minutes maximum. Secretary, please call the roll.
Senator Rocky Adams. Senator Girdler.
Aye.
Senator Harper Angel.
Explain my vote, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the opportunity.
Please proceed.
I vote no. This is the largest attempt at government overriding the will of our people, our children, our parents that I've ever seen in the last 20 years that I've been here. It is going to have devastating results, and it will not have my name attached to it. I vote no.
Senator Bledsoe. Senator Meredith.
I'll explain my vote, please.
Please proceed.
I'm voting no. But I want people to understand that we need to continue to have this dialogue. I certainly like the provisions of Senator Wise's bill. I think it's very much needed. I'm sorry that these things are put together. But a couple of things that still bother me about this is the definition of mental health services that address a person's sex or gender, but do not promote gender transition. I'm not sure exactly what that means, but when you couple that with revoking a provider's license or certification if a report is made under this subsection is confirmed, I think is a bridge too far. But probably the deciding factor for me is this discussion about who gets to make these decisions. And I've heard corporate America, I've heard medical community, I've heard government. You know, throughout this legislative session, we have promoted bills to support parents' rights. And I still think that's where this should lie. I would hope and pray that parents would always make the very best decision for their children. I think most part they do. But intervention beyond that, I think is also just a bridge too far. You know, we can't on one occasion say, well, this is about parental rights, and another occasion say it's not. And probably the thing that disturbs me most about this is I think that children should wait until they're 18 years of age before they have surgery involved. So there's certainly pros and cons for this either way, but again, my vote is no because I think the decision needs to rest with the parent. Thank you.
Senator Tishner.
Explain my vote.
Please proceed.
I'm voting yes. What we're talking about right now is a hard issue on both sides. And I see the audience full of people who are opposed to this. And I see people who've come to testify in fear because they're supporting this bill. It's been so divided. Where it lies with me, I don't think this bill could be strong enough. We're talking about irreparable, permanent changes to a child. Their brains are not developed. They're not. Frontal lobes are not developed until early mid-20s. They have no idea what the consequences could be until they get to that age. And at that point, you cannot undo what is being done. There is no long-term study. The only long-term study from Sweden shows that this actually is very harmful. So much so that Europe is starting to backtrack, as we heard the doctor testify. And with that, I'm voting yes.
Senator Webb. Senator Westerfield.
May I explain my vote?
Please proceed. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Chairman. I've spent more time on this bill than I have any other bill so far this session, with the exception possibly of medical marijuana and the sub that's in the committee today. I don't like how far this bill goes. I agree that surgery for minors is inappropriate. I believe that puberty blockers and other drugs that provide permanent changes are inappropriate for minors. I don't agree with that. I don't agree with those being allowed. If you're an adult, do whatever you want. Adults do what I don't agree with every day, and I do things that other adults don't agree with every day, I'm sure. So, but for minors, I agree with that. When I look at the sub on what gender transition services are, 2, 3, 4, and 5, I don't have any problem with that under subsection 6 in section 1. The part that's giving me a lot of trouble is 1, inpatient and outpatient hospital services. That is written so broadly. If I'm the lawyer for a doctor, I don't know how to tell him to answer a question that a mom or a dad asks. Even if I was the doctor myself and I wanted to ask a question about, or if I was being asked a question and I don't believe in this and I don't believe in transitioning, I don't think that's good, I don't think it's healthy, I think it goes against what God created. But if I was the doctor in that situation, even if I wanted to steer that child away, I don't know how I'd answer the question in a way that one parent might not think I was trying to assist. That liability is huge. I think it's overly hostile to providers, and we didn't have to go that far. I struggle with this bill. I know, Chairman, that you and I have talked about it, and I've spoken with members, and you guys ought to see the text messages that have been flying around and emails just in the last 2 or 3 hours. I hope to make changes on the floor, should this make it to the floor. I support, Senator Wise, your language in 150. I don't know how much time I've got left, Chairman. I'm sorry. I'm sure I've gone too daggum long. I'm going to vote aye, but with the understanding that I'm going to pursue changes on the floor to address the concerns I've expressed and that others have expressed here today. I don't think the bill should come to the floor the way it's written today. And I'd vote no if it comes to the floor the way it's written today.
Thank you. And I would recognize Senator Julie Rocky Adams to.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've been pretty clear that I don't like the bill. I've met with the sponsor. I've really struggled with the language. And I told the chairman today that the only way that I would vote yes is if he promised that we would make some changes to the bill. And he has assured me that in order to get myself and other caucus members comfortable, that he would agree to some further changes. So with that, I vote yes.
Senator Wise,
Aye.
Chairman Carroll.
I'd like to vote aye and explain my vote. I have spent the last 2 days researching, reading. Spent this morning speaking with a pediatrician. I asked a close friend of mine to connect me with a pediatrician who was unbiased in this issue and that could speak medically and medically only. There are no absolutes in this issue. The science, the data is just simply not there. We all want to do what's best for our kids, and I don't think there's any question about that. I'm extremely uncomfortable putting myself in the place where a doctor should be. I don't have the training. I don't have the knowledge to make decisions. However, I feel a complete obligation to protect our kids. I too don't like the bill. I hate the tone of the bill. I think we could have accomplished what we needed to accomplish without going so far. I'm in the process on working on some changes to this bill. If somebody could tell me 100% that if we allow all these things, it's going to prevent kids from committing suicide, I would support it. The data's not there. There is no absolute proof to this. Please. So my vote is an aye to carry the bill forward, and we we'll be having additional discussions on this, and hopefully we can come up with a more suitable product when it comes to the floor. At this point, I'd like to recognize Senator Webb to cast a vote.
Thank you, and I want everybody to know, even though had to be in and out, I was listening to the testimony, and most of my position's already been said. I'm going to vote no on this bill today because I do not want to interject myself with trained medical professionals. My father was a doctor of optometry, and I always deferred to him on those issues. I also represent children, and I've represented adults that have actually gone through therapies. We talked a lot about juvenile justice this issue in this session, and I think our hearts are in the right place. When I think of juvenile justice, we've also talked a lot about mental health services, which I think we have woefully underfunded for decades in this Commonwealth. And there are deserts, such as where I represent, of mental health access, opportunity, and affordability. I can't in good conscience go against medical community and parental rights. I think one of my colleagues stated earlier very eloquently that, and I've had these discussions with some groups, how to reconcile my parental rights votes as a parent and my faith and parental rights and be all over the board with it, choosing issues. So I believe in parental rights until something goes wrong, and there's mechanisms in this state we utilize now when parents make bad decisions and bad choices. And those mechanisms are still in place. My faith requires me to look at humanity and look at individuals in their humanity. We're all flawed in our humanity, and my faith allows me to offer myself and love to individuals and not hate them, to embrace them like Jesus did on the cross, you know. And I prayed a lot about this. My faith requires me to vote no on this particular bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, on a vote of 6-3, the bill passes with favorable expression. We also have a title amendment. I have a motion. Second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion carries. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attention today. And I don't know that I've ever faced a more difficult topic since I've been here. I think what's important, you know, the issue is going to be controversial for years to come. Despite whether we agree or disagree, we have to treat each other with respect as much as we can as we move forward. And exactly, how are we going to accomplish anything with that kind of attitude? Meeting stands adjourned.